Good morning, Professor Rubin. It's so nice to have you with us. We'll wait a few minutes, of course, before we start our official webinar to let people sign up, to let the registrants, get ready. But, we're really very excited to have you here.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a thrill. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Haifa is definitely, I think, my grandmother used to live there, so it's one of my, my most memorable cities in Israel. It's always, filled with going to Ganaim and to other parks and looking at the harbor. Yeah. Wow, I didn't say? Sorry. Apparently I'm making mistakes right offline, but it really is. And, every time when I go to Haifa, just, for people who are listening in, just to hear my thoughts, it's always a city where everything is mixed together. We go and have falafel pamunim and then go down and another time have the hummus by the port. And do you live in Haifa, by the way? I know you work at the university, but do you live in the city?
Confession to make, I don't. I live in a moshav nearby, but I don't live in Haifa. I used to live in Haifa, but when our kids grew up, we decided to move out of the city to be close to work and close to our kids who live in central part of the country and in the south. So we're somewhere between.
But you stayed near though.
But I'm broadcasting here from the university right now. So
you're on campus?
We're on campus right now, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
We're open for business under constrained circumstances, but we're nevertheless open for business. I'll go into some detail about that a little later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we'll give a couple more minutes. There's so many people who are already signed on, and thank you for signing on time. But we'll give, we'll be nice professors, and we'll give a couple more minutes before starting to hand out late notes, and we'll be. It started raining, huh? It started raining here, by the way, for you people in Israel. Yet again, it's raining here.
So lucky. It's been a heat wave, a never-ending heat wave here. Although where we are, we're about 530 meters above sea level. It's always cool. It's never hot, really. And we have sort of a little microclimate with lots of winds, and so we don't suffer as much as people do down at the bottom, along the seafront.
Another big plus then for your university.
We have people who know the campus know. From my office, I can see Lebanon, I can see Syria.
Wow.
Oh yeah, definitely I can see those countries from my office. And going south, I see beyond Hadera, so, it's quite a view.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because you're located on top of the mountain there.
Right. It's, I suppose the closest analogy would be San Francisco. And it is, you may know, Haifa is also a center of a world religion. I'm sure you know that.
Yes, the beautiful Baha'i gardens that are there.
This extremely exotic temple, sort of undulating down the hill all the way to the bay, to the German colony in the bay.
Yeah, this is exactly what we're saying, that it's sort of, Haifa is a microcosmos of Israel, definitely. And as you're saying now, maybe a little bit actually of the world, not just of Israel.
I think so. It's a small city, but we have 3 Nobel Prize winners in a city the size of Haifa.
Oh, wow.
The metropolitan area of Haifa is about 800,000, no more than that. Like a neighborhood in Shanghai, and they're 3 Nobel Prize winners. So
that is amazing. Amazing. Yeah. Maybe it's the weather.
It's an educated city, 2 major universities, so it's a well-educated city.
Very interesting. So wait, now we'll formally start, and I'm just waiting to hear all about this and about actually, we didn't have any questions planned about the city, but we're going to ask you now. So good afternoon, everybody here in the States. Good morning for you guys in the West Coast. Good evening to Israel. And as our friends in Haifa said, let me say also marhaba, because we have hopefully some people with us and participants from, the Middle East region. And from neighboring countries and not just from Israel. So we're very excited and very honored to have today for Academia Talk, Professor Ron Robin. He is the president of the University of Haifa. So welcome and thank you so much for being here with us.
My pleasure.
I'm so excited. I forgot to say that I'm Tammy Ben Haim. I'm the Minister of Public Diplomacy here at the embassy, and it really is my personal pleasure for many reasons, but I've been really looking forward to this talk with Professor Robin. I'll say a few words about him before we start. Professor Robin assumed his role as the 11th president of the University of Haifa in October of 2016, and he's still going strong now, and we'll hear about it. He graduated from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, actually, with a degree in history and Romance languages. This was followed by a PhD in US history from the University of California in Berkeley. So we're going to hear a little bit about his jumping back and forth from Israel to the US. Professor Robin was a faculty member at the University of Haifa for over 20 years, during which time he held several leadership positions, including Dean of Students. In 2006, Professor Robin joined New York University, where amongst his other duties, he served as Senior Vice Provost and was responsible for the establishment of the NYU international campuses in Abu Dhabi and in Shanghai. So as I said, we're really excited and extremely curious to hear from you today, Professor Robin, about many, many issues, from cooperation or possible cooperation with the UAE, to better science through academic diversity, from empowering women, and to how your university is dealing these days with the COVID-19 pandemic. So if it's okay with you, let's delve right into it.
Sure.
So I'm starting, we'll get to the background and hear about you and the university in a moment, but just because it's so in the headlines and so relevant these days, and you have firsthand real experience, can you tell us a bit your vision now that the agreement for normalization, and some people call it, hopefully a peace agreement between Israel and the UAE, can you tell us something personal about this, or what your vision would be for the University of Haifa?
Yeah, so first of all, personally, I feel vindicated. I feel elated that this has actually happened. It's a wonderful moment for both countries, of course, but it's also a very emotional moment for me personally. In 2008, I went personally to John Sexton, the president of NYU at the time, and I volunteered my services to help form the campus in Abu Dhabi, because I believe very strongly in dialogue between the Abrahamic religions, and knowing a little bit about Abu Dhabi and the Islam as it is practiced in Abu Dhabi and in the Emirates in general, I thought this would be a perfect starting point. And much to my surprise, John immediately gave me a position of leadership. I was responsible mostly for recruiting the faculty at NYU Abu Dhabi, and I must tell you, it has been a fascinating experience. I spent 8 years back and forth between New York and Abu Dhabi. I had a residence in Abu Dhabi. My wife would accompany me there. And we built, it was a very small team under the direction of the president and the provost. We built an extraordinary campus dedicated to liberal arts and to sciences. And from day one, the vice chancellor, that's the equivalent of the president, the vice chancellor, Al Bloom, the current vice chancellor, Mariette Westerman, have been committed to this idea of dialogue. Maybe that's even the wrong word. We listen very carefully to each other. Other universities are in the Gulf region, and there are other ventures like this, but there's no venture like NYU with this, and this discussion of different issues and a willingness to hear different opinions. It almost sends me back to medieval Spain, when Andalusian period, where Jews and Arabs and Christians engaged in very fruitful discussions on religion and society and culture, and an inclusive world where everybody can thrive and live their own lives. And this has been the great dream of Abu Dhabi. It's been absolutely phenomenal. Not to mention the science that goes on there, the science and research and teaching that goes on there, which is placed NYU Abu Dhabi as probably the most important university in the Arab world, definitely the strongest university in the Arab world. So this is a great moment.
And the students who go there are from Abu Dhabi or from the nearby countries, perhaps, or?
From any country you can think of. There is a group of people from Abu Dhabi. When I left Abu Dhabi, it was about 15, 16%. I'm not quite sure what the percentage of Emiratis is today. There was a similar size group from the United States, and then outstanding students from everywhere in the world. And I must tell you, and I hope I'm not offending anybody here, it's harder, it's more difficult to get into NYU Abu Dhabi than it is to get into NYU New York. It is such an exclusive school, and it recruits the best students in the world from any country imaginable. And hopefully in the near future, also from our region as well.
This is exactly my next question. You did such a good job and so wonderful. It's continuing this day with New York University in Abu Dhabi. What would what can you envision yourself doing as the University of Haifa with perhaps the campus of NYU in Abu Dhabi or other such institutions?
Well, building bridges, of course, between the two cultures, the two nations, and the universities on our side and the universities in the Emirates. I think this is the perfect moment. We can we'll benefit each other mutually. I'm pretty sure about that. There are certain areas in which we have similar concerns. I'll mention just a couple. Anything that has to do with marine sciences is a concern for both nations. We're experiencing climate change, and it's affecting the Gulf as it's affecting the Mediterranean. And these are our lifelines. We get our potable water from the sea in both countries. We get our energy to a large degree from oil wells and gas wells close to the coast. And we also get a very significant portion of our protein from the sea. So these are our lifelines. And as we go through climate change, both countries are experiencing a tremendous shift in the ecosystem in the sea. And that's just one example of where we could collaborate. Obviously, this dialogue between religions, between Abrahamic religions, it's a perfect place because you may know this, but a very significant portion of our student body are Muslims, Christians, Druze. You know, we're in the north of the country. Were I to look out of my window, just behind the sign over here, and look towards the north, were I to include the metropolitan area of Haifa, about 50% of the population is Jewish. Were I to remove the metropolitan area of Haifa, 25% of the population is Jewish. So we live in a very multicultural part of the country. The north of the country is this incredible tapestry of different people espousing different faiths, different beliefs, but all believing in one thing: it's the role of education in providing a bridge between different cultures.
Amazing. That, and I've spoken to you before. I've spoken to other university staff, and we've been reading. This seems to be definitely one of your main goals, or the way you see working, having both a responsibility for science and academics, but also for the social aspect. And I think the name of our webinar today definitely gives that, doing science through multiversity. Can you expand a little bit about your vision and what you are doing within the university?
So let me explain what the multiversity means, and I think that will lead to some other questions. First and foremost, the multiversity is the fusion of disciplines. We no longer live in a world where one discipline can provide a solution for any problem. So if I were to take a problem like aging, which is a worldwide problem, there's no one discipline that can address that, obviously from biology, but there are psychological aspects, there are political aspects. Any discipline you can think of is related to that, or the sea, or any other of those areas. So the multiversity takes multiple disciplines and fuses them together. The multiversity also believes very strongly in having a presence in multiple places in the north. It's not always a physical presence. We've learned also to have virtual presence through internet. We've learned this from COVID, of course, but we need to have a presence throughout the north of the country. And so we have multiple sites. Some are virtual, some are physical, in the city of Haifa, and we will have in the future in the north of the country. That's the other aspect of the multiversity. And the third aspect, which you've touched upon already, is that this incredible tapestry that makes up Israeli society, the multiple groups that make up Israeli society, are all represented at the university. And so those are the three legs, if you would, of the multiversity. We're extremely proud of them all. Since you asked about the cultural aspect, I want to say a couple of words about this. We are the creators of Israel's new middle class, which is inclusive and embracive of all the groups in Israeli society. The startup nation shall continue to thrive if everybody is part of the startup nation, and that's our job.
That's a beautiful sentence.
I'll tell you, if I may, a little story that happened a couple of years ago, which I think is indicative of where we're going. It was high holidays. It was basically around this period. We were living in the center of the Carmel at the time, my wife and I, it was Yom Kippur. And those of you who know what Yom Kippur looks like in a secular city in Israel, know it could be a little carnivalesque. It's people out on skates and bikes, and so come Yom Kippur.
Everybody's taking advantage of the Day of Atonement, where the state, all of Israel, is basically shut down.
Right, and they're out in the streets. Probably not the right occasion, but people seem to be having fun. And so we went out into the streets full with prams, with bicycles, with skates, a lot of talking and babbling. And it looked pretty much like any Yom Kippur we had seen before we left for the States. We were 10 years in the States between 2006 and 2016. But there was something different. And it was the mixture of languages on the street. If once upon a time we're probably on top of the mountain where the middle class lives, it would have only been Hebrew. Today, the middle class includes Russian immigrants, it includes Arabs, it includes almost any group you can think of. It includes French immigrants. When you walk out into the street on an occasion like that, you can see that something dramatic is happening in Israel thanks to the universities. The middle class is opening up from what it once used to be, and every group in society somehow is drawn to the universities and becomes part of that middle class. That is, in many ways, our social objective, if you would. But of course, social objectives are not enough. We have academic aspirations. We like I've mentioned one, we are the University of the Sea. We're the only university in the country with a School of Marine Sciences. And we have equipment and faculty that actually doesn't exist east of France, nothing like it anywhere east of France. And you may not know this, but we know more about the surface of the moon than we know about the bottom of the sea. And this doesn't make much sense for a country whose lifeline is the sea. And we have to improve that, of course. We have very strong brain and cognitive science here, which we are very proud to have an international faculty and international connections. Our School of Education is ranked #1 in Israel and is among the 150 best schools in the world, according to the Shanghai. And I also want to say something about another aspect of our student body that I do not want to forget. And that is the number of women. We empower women. 68% of our students are women. And even among our Arab students, in a field like computer science, most of our Arab students are women. So we're changing the nature of society very dramatically in Israel. I often tell people, don't pay attention to the news. The news is noise. But the news, there are very important sociological developments happening in Israeli society that bode very favorably for the future.
I mean, you've said so many things here, and I want to ask you basically about almost every sentence, but maybe I'll start a little bit at the beginning. You're talking about getting women even into STEM and computer sciences. You're talking about getting the Arab society or the Arab population into university, and many of them are actually first generation will be for higher education. How do you reach out to these populations? How do you get them I am assuming you don't just sit and wait for the applications. How do you get them excited? How do you let them know, is it possible? Where do you begin planting the seed to come one day and, look to University of Haifa as a goal to come be a student there?
Well, we have a series of days, which we call open days, where we open up our campus to high school kids. Kids is the wrong word, high school students, I guess. They're much more than kids.
Young adults.
They're very mature. And we open up our campus, and we, in addition to that, we have an Arab Jewish center here on campus where we hold on a regular basis seminars for kids coming in from high schools. And we have a very strong outreach program. I will say this, though, that the parents in the north of the country are extremely ambitious. And I would guess that they would probably send their kids to see the university. When we have a day of science, we have a science day here on campus where we sort of open it up to anybody from the age of 5 to the age of 50. And all the schools in the area come here. We have a very strong outreach program to make sure that we reach every single person, and we talk to the parents as well. We want to make sure that they understand that we're here to empower them, to empower their children, and especially women who until recently would study in very traditional fields, become teachers maybe. They still do. Becoming strong teachers is a strong goal with us. But we want to make sure.
Great profession. We see these days how important it is.
Absolutely. But we want to make sure that in STEM professions, as you have said, that we have a very strong presence of minority students and minority women. Because as you enter Haifa from the south, you may know there's a big, huge high-tech park where every multinational that you can think of is represented. And those multinationals expect a multi-ethnic workforce. And together with the Technion, our next door neighbor just down the hill, we provide that because we see that as part of our mission.
And do you see, since you took the office of president in 2016 until today, do you see more women applying? Do you see less resistance maybe within the more conservative part of the population or traditional to sending the young girls, women to your university?
Oh, there's less resistance, mostly because we provide we provide a very safe environment for people coming from the north. I'll just give you one example. We have many women coming from Arab villages in the north who may be a little resistant to living in co-ed dorms. And so we've set aside dorms for women who feel more comfortable living separately. And their parents feel more comfortable with that, because moving from a small settlement in the north to a university in the big city, Haifa is a big city as far as Israel is concerned, it's a major move. And we want to make sure that first and foremost, that the parents feel that their sons and daughters are safe. As you mentioned, these are first generation students in academia. It's a major step for the family. In some cases, it's a huge sacrifice. Even though tuition in Israel is relatively modest, tuition can run around the $2,000, a little bit more than that maybe. I'm not quite sure the exact number in dollars, but it's around that figure. It can be a stretch for some of these families who live up north, especially now, by the way, when we're going through somewhat of an academic crisis. But we do everything to make sure that people feel safe, that people feel that they're getting a good education, and that we take care of them emotionally, socially, and of course, academically.
Thank you for that. And just one thing, because the sign behind you, one, it's a beautiful sign of the University of Haifa, and I think it already shows some of your inclusivity, because it's the first time I've seen the university present itself in 3 languages, in English and Hebrew, of course, and in Arabic. So I think it really, you're talking, but you're also doing, which is great. I'm going to jump ahead because you mentioned the crisis. You called it an academic crisis. And COVID-19, Corona, the pandemic is hitting us all over the world. And you have vast experience, both as a student and as a professor or faculty here in the United States with NYU, and of course, in Israel, in the University of Haifa. Can you tell us first a little bit about how Haifa is now adjusting to
Yeah.
life in this new reality, and then maybe the comparison or what we can do now with the US on this field?
So it's been like a roller coaster in many ways. We started off really bad, and then things have improved rapidly. And now we're heading downhill, unfortunately, right now. And I think it's an element of fatigue. What has happened is that it's been going on for quite some time, since January, basically. And fatigue is set in, and it's difficult to keep people disciplined under these circumstances. So here at the university, we are very disciplined. We follow, of course, the rules and regulations set by government, but we provide we understand that that this is a situation that can change from one day to the next. And so we've set up a hybrid system whereby we can teach partially on campus, but partially off campus. We've retrofitted our classrooms with equipment that, like cameras that follow the teacher, the lecturer, wherever he or she goes.
GoPros? They wear little GoPros, or how do you?
It's set somewhere up at a different angle. There are actually a number of cameras, and it just follows almost like a TV studio. It follows the teacher and allows them, when they turn to the board or anything like that, it follows them. But it also has the capacity for a limited amount of students in the classroom. We're extremely worried about the opening of the school year, which will happen after the high holidays, especially with first-year students. If we do not get first-year students on campus, they are going to miss a significant part of a university education. Much of a university education takes place outside of the classroom. And we want to make sure that people have that opportunity to meet, to mingle, to figure out who their next door neighbor is. I'll tell you something else about Haifa. Haifa is home to the 3 major military colleges in Israel. There are 3 officer training colleges in Israel for junior officers up to the rank of captain, then up to lieutenant colonel, and then for generals, major generals. There are 3 major military colleges. They're all on our campus. And I want you to, and by the way, all the naval cadets take a degree on campus. So I want you to imagine a day on our campus where there are senior military officers, naval cadets, Arab women in traditional dress, secular Jews. It's surrealistic.
It really is.
Yes.
All studying the same thing together.
Same thing. So you can see why the campus experience is so incredibly important, and how we're going to try, no matter what. I'm sorry, I'm looking to my right to a friend of mine who's sitting next to me to get her confirmation that that she understands what I'm trying to say to you. It is such a unusual campus. You see everything in Israeli society transpiring here on our campus between us.
That is incredible. I'm trying, I'm Israeli. I've been to, I studied at Hebrew U, but an Israeli university, one of the 8. And I'm having, trying to envision it in my head, how it looks and how it goes. So it's amazing. And I absolutely agree with you. The first year students, especially if, you need to get hooked in order to stay, I think, because the second and third year are more difficult even, and you need to have the drive to stay and finish your degree.
Right, and the interaction with faculty, all those things are incredibly important. So we're actually preparing for every possible eventuality. We know that the first semester is going to be difficult, but we do hope that we'll be able to bring people in small capsules, first-year students in small capsules onto campus, and get them to interact with the faculty, get them to interact with each other. There are certain fields, especially, we mentioned STEM before, that are extremely difficult to handle if you don't have somebody holding your hand at the beginning. And we want to make sure that that happens.
And also Haifa University has many, many research centers and labs and research going on. Is that still continuing regularly under Corona, or what adjustments are you making?
So we have multiple labs. that are open. All our labs are basically open right now. We manage them by limiting the number of people in the labs. I'm going to ask Hila. She said I should give an example. Which one?
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, a wonderful example. I should have thought of that one myself. We are a very strong university in archaeology, especially in underwater archaeology. And
Wow.
we are working now with Scripps, with University of San Diego with Scripps, to do a hugely important underwater archaeological program by which we do the diving, we produce the specimens are afterwards transported to San Diego, and all this goes on as COVID rages all around us. And we try to continue these collaborations with US universities and other universities at the same time. We are very strong in a field called zooarchaeology. We are reconstructing DNA of flora and fauna from biblical times.
Wow.
Yes.
Where do you find it? Like in excavations or in?
Yes, in excavations. Our archaeologists are busily looking for the garbage dumps that people used in ancient times, where they find remnants of food and other stuff from which we can reconstruct DNA. We are producing strong strains of wheat that will be resistant to climate change, because some of the places where wheat were grown in the past had difficult climates. We're working on a strain of wheat that can be grown in saline water. Imagine what a change that is going to make to food supply once we figure that out and turn it into a commercial project. And most of this is done through archaeology. You find, and you join it with, you take the DNA of modern wheat, let's take it, ancient wheat products, you figure it out, and you produce something which is resistant to many of the problems that we'll be facing in the near future. It's joining the past, the present, and the future in a manner which I find personally very, very exciting, and I'm sure others do as well.
It really, really is. And it goes back to how you started with the multiversity. This is just, I think, another aspect of it, how you were able to tie in things that I think you would ask me or any of the, the hundreds of participants we have, nobody would have made, oh yeah, of course, archaeology to deal with the, food shortage or the food issues we're having these days. Yeah, and saline definitely with Israel and the areas, actually water shortage, and we see it sadly in more and more places in the world, not just in our region anymore, the issue of potable water or the use of any water. So you said, you mentioned the University of San Diego, but for Corona and with all your ties, do you discuss or do you have now new programs with different universities around the world, because everything is Zoom?
So we are, here's something which struck us originally as somewhat unusual, but now it of course makes sense. Our initial thought was that our international programs, we have multiple international programs, and I'll mention a few in a moment, would go under, would basically be without students. But that's not the case, because we deliver them online. We actually have an increase in enrollment in our international programs. We have a number of ones. We have an excellent program in international public health, where students in the past would come here physically and be here physically. There are some students who made it here physically, but the vast majority have signed up online, and the program is thriving. We have.
It was a very good program. I just have to tell people it was one of the, I think, best known programs in Israel without regard to COVID-19, the public health, and now it's even more relevant.
Now it's even more relevant, absolutely. And in another area completely, we have probably one of the 2 or 3 strongest programs in the world in Holocaust studies. It's all international students who, it's a master's program. So students who come from the best university. This year, we have students from Harvard, we have students from Cambridge, we have students from all over the world who take this program. And it is one of the strongest programs in the world. We have a program in sustainability in the business school, which is an international program. Many Chinese students took this program, and they continue to take this program, even though it's now delivered online. So through the magic of technology, we managed to sustain these programs, and in fact, in many of them, to keep enrollment even above where we were last year.
Amazing.
So those are three really good examples, I think, of how we've managed to keep this going.
I think because we spoke about this and about the labs that are continuing, we're just getting a few questions, and I'm going to just take these questions before and group them. Everybody wants to know, is the University of Haifa doing, whether in the labs or perhaps more with the social aspects, are you doing anything specific for COVID-19 or fighting COVID-19 or dealing with COVID-19?
Yeah, so we have about 55 different research projects right now, most of them funded by the Ministry of Science, and the vast majority of them dealing with social aspects of COVID, how to cope with the pandemic at schools, at home, in society. And of course, we have our programs, we have, as you mentioned, public health. We have a variety of research projects taking place in public health. There are 55 programs that are now funded by either competitive foundations or by government right now taking place. We're not going to be the place to produce the vaccine. That's not us. But the various the various fallout from social, political, and cultural of pandemic, both in Israel and abroad, is something which we're extremely strong, and we're doing this right now. Yes.
Amazing, amazing. I wanted, yeah, you spoke about, I guess then now what you're saying is that university is becoming perhaps more universal in a way with the cooperation and working with the different students, are you also using different lecturers or doing joint programs with other universities?
So let me first say something which is a self-evident truth, and anybody who knows, there are many people on this call who know something about universities. We are citizens of the world. We do not exist in closed quarters. Everything that we do is global, and if we are unable to do global, then we're probably unworthy of the title of university. And so, yeah, we have collaborations in the US. I've mentioned San Diego, UC San Diego, the Scripps. We have a very strong collaboration with Texas A&M that also deals with marine sciences. Yeah, we have a strong program with UConn on dialogue between the Abrahamic religions. That's another area in which we have strengths, and we do have a university which I would say has a very strong partnership in Shanghai. They send us students. People, in China find Jewish culture to be very compelling. And it's relatively easy to get Chinese students to come and try and understand various aspects of Israeli society, especially those that have to do with business initiatives or things along those lines. And so the university is called East China Normal. It's in Shanghai. And those are the major universities in which we have collaborations. We're doing two other things too.
Around the globe, or all the way around and back.
We're now establishing relationships with Ivy League universities in the United States, and we do this in a grandiose fashion by starting at the top. And so last year we gave an honorary doctorate to the president of Yale, Peter Salovey. This year, unfortunately, we're unable to give a doctorate so far to the president of Harvard, but he will be getting a doctorate here soon. And we're starting at the top, and from there building out. For instance, with Harvard, we have a very strong program which we're initiating as we speak.
Oh, wow.
on communication between large marine mammals, whales, basically. It's going to take place in the Caribbean. It's a collaboration with Harvard, with City University in New York, and I forget the other universities, but this is a huge project.
Amazing.
Which is funded, by the way, well, I'm not allowed to say, oops. I'm not allowed to say who's funding it.
As long as it's happening, we're happy with this. This is amazing.
Still an embargo on who's funding this project. I'm glad I caught that at the last moment.
Yeah, because these days on social media, you need to be Yeah, there's no, you can't take anything back. But that is amazing that Israel and University of Haifa gets to be in a project that, again, like we mentioned before, it's not something I would have naturally thought about an Israeli university, even though Haifa, of course, is by the sea and has, the biggest port in Israel. But I wouldn't have thought that we would be one of the, four universities joining in such a
Yeah.
international project.
And you can imagine there are biologists, there are linguists, there's any sort of discipline you can think. Once again, coming back to the theme of the multiversity, nothing today can be studied by one discipline, by one department. Everything has to be fused together, and that's our mission, our academic mission.
It sounds, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm sure it's also very difficult to actually do because
God.
I'm sure, right? Because it's bringing people together who don't even think alike. I'm sure, the mathematics department would not, with any of the social sciences, I don't know, you need to get them talking the same language in many ways. It's
Well,
not gonna,
academics are a disputatious people to begin with, and and then place them in Israel, and you can see what sort of it's a challenge. But when it works, it's unbelievable. When people actually understand and wrap their heads around this fusion of disciplines and how we feed upon each other and we thrive with each other.
And organized on our
and you argue.
Yeah, it's an argue until you're blue in the face. It changes things very dramatically.
organized anarchy.
It's, yes, the term that I use, Hila, reminds me, is organized anarchy. That's what it is.
I think, you know what, this might apply for the world these days under this pandemic.
Yeah.
And I find it very suitable to the life I'm personally living between, work, home, work, school, home, school. And so it's very interesting that you applied it before. And I just want to, on a personal note, do you think your vision and what you're implementing these days at the universities sort of comes from you really, you've been everywhere. I can say because your accent, I'm sure other people figured it out as well, but it's a South African accent. And
Correct.
talking about, multiracial, multicultural, South Africa is the epitome of it after Israel and after Haifa, now that I've heard your description. But, and New York as well, NYU is in the center of New York. Can you tell us a little bit what you learned in your years of academia abroad and bringing it back to Israel?
Yeah, and I've studied and I've actually been physically in places where I doubt many Israelis have been, of course, in the Gulf. We know that from the beginning of the talk. But I've also been multiple times to Pakistan using a South African passport.
Wow.
Not my Israeli passport. And I assisted a university in Pakistan in producing a program for secular education.
In Pakistan?
Pakistan, in Karachi, yes. I'll tell you a funny story about this. When I arrived in Pakistan, my South African passport obviously traveled. As I arrived, I said, it's a short story. I was born in Israel. My father came when I was as a volunteer in 1948 during the War of Independence, married my mother from a Jerusalem family. And when I was 6 weeks old, the family returned to South Africa. So my South African passport says born in ISR.
Oh.
So when the guy picks up my passport in Pakistan, he says to me, "And what is ISR?" And I said, "Oh, that's a province in South Africa."
Wow. Wow.
I got one.
That's for a minute.
It was a little scary.
Yeah.
I was in Pakistan multiple times. I've seen educational systems in all parts of the world. And I've seen that the best systems are those that open their doors and listen carefully to other ideas, even if they seem very strange at the time. And the best universities, and I would put NYU definitely in that place, and Haifa aspires to be there as well, are those who are not afraid to open up their labs, their classrooms to ideas coming from other cultures. And that's the way universities thrive. Obviously, the base is the Western concept of the university. That is the base of all thriving universities. And there's something in the Western university that allows you also to listen very carefully to other cultures. And that's what makes, I think, universities in the United States so powerful and so great. And I think that's in many ways the secret of Israeli universities, because we are a kibbutz galuyot. What is the right phrase in English? We're a collection
Gathering of the diasporas, maybe?
of nations live in this country. We come from different parts of the globe, and we even though we share a faith. The Jews among us share a faith, and we share a basic culture. We also bring ideas from other cultures, and that's what makes us so incredibly creative, and the ability also to innovate and figure out solutions in a manner which I think other cultures always look at us and their jaws drop when they see how we somehow figure it out, you know? Even if it's a problem that doesn't lend itself to a typical solution, we'll figure it out. And that's part of this openness to other cultures, which I think has always been a trademark of Israel and a trademark of strong universities.
Yeah, that is, and also you mentioned definitely figuring it out. I like how you phrase it, but also you mentioned before, even in a city like Haifa, where your university is located, you said in one city in Israel, we have 3 Nobel Prize winners. So
Yeah.
it's figuring out locally, but definitely with an international or worldwide effect if you know these thinkers are there and doing it in your city.
It makes no sense. It's a small city. Out of my window here, where I have to look out of my window on our campus, IBM has its largest R&D center outside of the United States, situated on our campus, just behind me. Downtown, you know, the Pentium was invented, or was created, not invented, but created in the Intel plant here in Haifa. And I can go on, and it just makes no sense. We're a tiny city, and we're just so creative. And it has a lot to do with the fact that we're open, that we listen, and that we provide education for all.
And can I assume that this is your vision and it's going to be what will lead you in the coming years for the University of Haifa to expand this multiversity and inclusion?
Absolutely. You know, we have now, we're going through a strategic assessment here at the university to figure out the next 10 years. I will be the president of the university for the next 4 years.
Nice.
And that's because we have term limitations, but we're planning for the next 10 years.
Good idea.
Good idea. Yes, I agree. Term limitations is always a good idea. And, but we're planning for the next 10 years. And we're trying to figure out what fields. You know, we have a very powerful neighbor next to us, the Technion. We want to excel in fields. We see ourselves as collaborating with the Technion. Once again, I'm so sorry you can't see out the window. Were you to look out the window, you would see a cable car joining us to the Technion, which will start running in 3 months' time.
Wow. I'm coming. I invite everybody to join me whenever we can fly again to Israel. We're going to come and see both campuses and go on the cable car.
Exactly.
Amazing.
So campuses are going to be linked, and we will collaborate as well. The Technion has its strengths, we have our strengths, and together I'm sure we can do wonderful things. And we hope to do that in the future. So amazing things are happening right now, which you never hear of, because we're sort of sucked in by the daily events that affect us. And I'm not belittling the daily events under any circumstances, but the robust developments that are happening under these daily events will transform Israeli society in a positive manner as we get out of this particular crisis, and as we face the crises of the future. You asked about the projects that we're doing here at the future. So you know that climate change is next, and we're all going to have to confront climate change as we move forward. And we know that we're moving into a multiple-year recession throughout the world, and we have to figure out solutions. And those solutions will come, hopefully, from universities. And as we join forces with another university, with other universities, as we open our door to other campuses across the world, we'll be able to provide solutions not only for Israel, but I think for the world in general.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And I heard this warning, by the way, that you spoke about climate change, that even with, you know, flights stopping and people driving less and the carbon emissions being drastically lowered these past few months, it hasn't even really had an effect on climate, and it just shows how grave and how serious the situation is. And you're sort of giving me hope, and I'm sure to our participants and viewers as well. That the research is, nobody's sitting quietly. The research is continuing, and you're continuing to look forward, and what other ailments, what other issues will come up, and be forward thinking with your research on it.
So if you look at countries that surround us, if I may mention a point that links climate change to what we do here at the university, look at what happened in Syria. You can look at what's happening in Lebanon right now, where climate change has sped up political crisis in these countries, and they've not been able to handle it. And I'm going to give one reason, and it's going back to almost the beginning of this talk. Neither country has a robust middle class, and without a robust middle class, when you're struck by nature or by any other reason for a crisis, societies are unable to respond. And we know we're a society, we're used to crises. They sometimes come from outside, they're sometimes internal, and we've survived them all, and we'll survive them all because we have a robust middle class, and universities produce that.
So this is now a question that came up a couple of times, and I think it will be a good final question, because I think you've answered it, but maybe you'd like to add. We're asking about what you see. I think it's a combination of the challenges you see and the vision you're facing. So would you be able to sum it up for us, what for the next 2, 3, 4 years, but hopefully also later, what is your vision for the universities and for the social part of the universities, or the more, the outside academic and outside academic, what you would see, what you would summarize as your vision and what you're going to do?
So first and foremost is to, within the next 4 years, to make sure that our academic impact has an effect on Israeli society and beyond. And in areas that I've mentioned, we can affect food supply, whether it's through creating new forms of crops by joining together the study of the past with the study of the present. We can affect very dramatically what happens along our seafront and protect our water, food supply, and energy supply. And we'll continue to develop our fields like in brain and cognitive science, where we will collaborate with universities here and abroad on fields like aging. And aging is a particularly strong area in which we will have an impact, and I'm sure that will be part of it as well. Hila's reminding me of other fields that I have not mentioned, and of course we have a social mission which we've mentioned multiple times. It is to make sure that this society, which is constantly under some sort of strain, whether it's from threats coming from outside or natural threats, political turmoil of one kind or another, that it is able to withstand those threats and maintain a thriving democratic society. That is another one of our paramount missions as a university, and I think we're living up to that cause quite well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And I'll just say, the school year has started in the US this week, so our talk is very, very timely, and universities are opening here, some in different forms, but are opening. Schools, of course, are opening. So allow me, and if you want to add, just to invite whoever wants to, perhaps, right? What you said, you have online courses, you have online degrees, hopefully one day in person. So I think any student who's interested in academic excellence and feels the vision that you are talking about and the fields you mentioned can definitely look you up and come and at least consider studying in Haifa.
So please, you can find my email very easily on mail. If you're in the US, you might approach ASU, the American Society of the University of Haifa. You'll find them easily online, and we're happy to provide anybody considering studying in Israel with the opportunity to fulfill this in Haifa, a very unique opportunity to study Israeli society in all its glory and this incredible tapestry of different cultures. You will only find it here, and you'll find it in one of the most beautiful cities that you've ever visited.
And I agree, and I'm not at the University of Haifa, and I absolutely agree with you 100%. And I would like to thank you again, Professor Ron Robin, for taking this time and joining us. And you know, I learned a lot of things. I was taking some notes while you were talking. I felt like I was, because it really, really incredible. And, you know, hopefully we'll be able to talk to you or your researchers about some of the projects you mentioned, from climate change to marine archaeology and biology, to joining our, you know, archaeology and zoo archaeology. I'm saying it
Yes,
right.
that's true.
Just incredible, and thank you so much for this. We're looking forward, and hopefully when your school year starts, it will be successful as well.
And may I take this opportunity to wish you and anybody who's on this podcast a very happy new year. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Thank you so much. It was
Thank
incredible.
you.
And thank you
Bye.
all of you for joining us. I see really from all across the US, I see Europe, I see from different places, Israel, of course. And yeah, Shana Tova. Thank you, Professor.
My pleasure.
Stay safe,
Bye.
everybody.